right, everyone. Welcome in to our third edition of our coffee chat series here at the U.S. Embassy, Nepal. I'm Ms. Erica Alexander, and I oversee culture and public engagement here at the embassy. And I am very, very happy to be with a special person here today. Her name is Sneh Rajbhandari. And a little bit about Sneh. She is the head of public affairs, communications, and sustainability at Coca-Cola Beverages Nepal. And she's also the general secretary of AmCham Nepal, which, if you know what AmCham is, also the organization that helping us here with the Coffee Chat series, which is the American Chamber of Commerce here in Nepal. So a little about Sneh. So a little about her position, but what does that mean and what does she do with it? So throughout today or this session, I'll be asking her a bit of questions about her background and her day-to-day operations and what does that mean for her in Coke. But she has over 14 years of experience across public policy, strategic comms, and sustainability. And she also leads stakeholder engagement and policy advocacy to support business growth and responsible operations. She serves on multiple industry and advisory boards and actively contributes to national dialogue on sustainability, investment, and inclusive economic development. So with that, Sneh, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. Really happy to be talking with you. So I've seen all that you do on the back end. I'm able to be in community with you on several events and also, of course, with AmCham. So just thank you so much for taking out of your very busy schedule to talk with me today.
Not at all, Erica. Thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to be here with all of you to share a cup of coffee with all of you.
So, of course, you see coffee already. And of course, if you like so, we have something in the back for you. So if you've not been here before for our coffee chat series, just give you a little bit of a rundown on how it's going to work. So I'll be asking Sneh some questions. And of course, she'll be answering it. But if you do have any questions out here in the audience, you will be able to do so at the end. So no worries here. Again, Sneh has been very, very gracious and allowed us to ask her kind of anything. But we'll make sure to keep it to time. We'll make sure to respect her time and also give you all some time. We'll talk a little bit one-on-one with her afterwards for some cookies and coffee. So with that, let's start, shall we? So here at this U.S. Embassy Coffee Chat series, we're highlighting leadership, but what kind of leadership? We're highlighting that ethical and values-based business leadership. So my question to you is, how does Coca-Cola Nepal approach responsible business operations while remaining commercially competitive?
So once again, thanks so much, Erica. And I'm really glad to be here with everybody as well. It's a pretty opportune moment for us. Coca-Cola just celebrated 140 years as well. We just had our birthday recently on May 8th. So the fact that we're having this conversation in the same month, I feel like we're still celebrating that spirit a little bit.
Good timing.
But, I just also wanted us to think about that a little bit, right? 140 years of an institution. It's far outlived its founders, right? And the vision has really resonated across more than 200 countries in the world as well. And so for any institution to do that, right, let alone a business, I really feel like it would have to have like a clear purpose as well to really connect with a wider audience. I feel like across the world, we've continued to stay adaptable as well. And in the end, I think there's a lot of resilience built into long-term thinking of how this institution is built out, right, throughout the world. Now, coming to Nepal as well, I think most of you in this room know we've been in Nepal for about 53 years and counting. The first Coke bottle was imported here in 1973. And we have 2 bottling plants, which some of our American Chamber members have had the chance to visit as well, one in Balaju and one in Bharatpur as well, which hopefully I'd love to invite all of you after this to come visit in case you haven't been as well. I think for Coca-Cola, right, especially you talked about values and especially being ethical. And as with many American companies, I think Coca-Cola in Nepal also values transparency, doing business fairly, and really prioritizes being a compliant corporate citizen. And so for me, actually, personally, when I joined Coca-Cola as well, I come from the development sector. I never imagined I would work for a multinational, let alone Coca-Cola. But I think I was drawn to this company and business because of the rigorous focus on doing business responsibly. And I felt like the company really tried to prioritize sustainability at the heart of the business as well. Um, some things that we do in Nepal as a part of our environmental responsibility include the work that we do on packaging and collection of our packaging materials, right, across the value chain. We have water replenishment programs that we do. Water is a key ingredient for us, so we take that work very, very seriously as well. And besides all of this, I mean, the most interesting thing is, so when you hear packs and policy, you don't really think there's numbers involved, right? But then I get to work very closely with our supply chain teams who are day in, day out looking at what is our water usage ratio? How much water are we using to produce a liter of our beverage, right? And so there's maths involved there for sure. And similarly, we're looking at how much are we emitting in terms of carbon. And so there's a consistent and conscious effort day in, day out to see how we can be more efficient, if we can leverage more greener technologies as well, and to really optimize the overall operations. And I think one thing personally that I have learned from Coca-Cola in terms of planning is that so every year in, year out, we do a short-term 1-year business plan. But then we also do a long-range planning, right, for the larger, like 3 to 5 years. But the reality is every month we're doing a check-in. Where are we on the planning? Do we need to recalibrate? So in that sense, in terms of your second part of the question of how we remain commercially viable, it's this day in, day out check-in across all functions to see if we're sticking to the plan, how we can optimize the plan, what we can do to improve. So it's a daily consistent habit of really looking at what we're doing right, what we need to improve. And that's, I think, what really makes us sustain across so many different markets in the world as well.
Well, that's really interesting to hear about. I mean, I think everyone in the room and hopefully around the world knows Coca-Cola, right? But there's something to be said about that intentionality. Everyone likes the short-term outcomes, but having that long-term planning is, I think, of course, 140 years is a long time. You already had success with that sort of long-term planning. And I think that there's something to be said about that, especially when people are thinking about what kind of company they want to work for. Because there's an external part, of course, the business, but also the internal part of that. And I think a lot of people today, especially young people, are looking for businesses and companies to work at that they had those sort of like those strategies, that sort of intentionality when it comes to their operations. So let's switch gears a little bit. Speaking about, I guess, the corporate culture at Coca-Cola, I think that's kind of like buzzwords when it comes to like people here today are like looking for in their company or their career. But when it comes to the youth here in Nepal, the young professionals here in Nepal, they are obviously increasingly seeking careers connected to innovation, sustainability, and global businesses. And of course, companies that have that in the forefront of their strategy. So there's that for the company culture. But when it comes to these young people seeking out opportunities, what kind of skills and leadership qualities do you believe are the most important for the next generation of professionals here in Nepal?
I think you've asked this question at such an interesting time for us right now, right? I really feel like Nepal is at an exciting tipping point. We have a generation of young people who are really civically engaged as well and much more informed. I also really admire that young people now have the agency to raise their voice across different platforms as well. But what I've also realized is, right, that somewhere for us in Nepal, I was looking at some data as well. If you look at youth unemployment, it's still at about 20%, if I'm not mistaken as well. And bringing that closer to my own industry, so in manufacturing as well, I think sometimes we struggle to find sort of that talent pool that really fits in to the skill sets required for manufacturing as well. So I think it comes down to a part of it is also the foundational educational structures. Are we looking at skills-based learning? Are we looking at experiential learning, right? So starting from the bottom up, but that's maybe something much more wider than what we're discussing, and that's more institutional reforms or policy reforms in the education space, which I know this current government is also working towards, along with the local government. But then now, if you look at where the world is moving as well, right? on everybody's like tip of their mouth. Everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about digital, right? And now it's not only just knowing how to use AI, it's like learning how to code in AI, right? I already feel like I'm a little bit behind in that, but I see young people kind of fluidly learning that language and being able to sort of transfer that knowledge and skill set into doing whatever they want to. I think any kind of technical skills that young people are able to acquire, I would really encourage you to do that, right? Go out in the market, like try and go out of your comfort zone and also try things that maybe you haven't, because you can always learn something that's different from your sector, right? And add that into whatever you're doing. So one side is like whatever technical skills you can build out, ensuring you have that sort of technology lens and digital lens and, become savvy there. But I think for me, it still comes down to this world is a place where human connections matter still.
Right.
And I feel like the soft skills are something that will always win out, or at least that's my hope anyway for this world, that soft skills, communication, creativity, collaboration, right? These are skills that translate, of course, across borders as well. And so I would love to see people willing to collaborate, willing to work with different cultures. And especially as a global company, I would have to talk to somebody in Atlanta or Japan, or, even somebody sitting in Kenya, for example, right? So working across time zones and all of that. So I think these soft skills will hopefully always give you like a little bit of an edge. And the last thing I always say, and this is actually a reminder to myself as well, because again, in being in this space of policy and interacting with stakeholders, often you have a message that you want to give to somebody, right? And you go in prepared. I have this message, I have to translate this. But then every once in a while, I have to remind myself, hold on, I need to listen to the other side as well before I, respond with my message. So this active listening is another skill set I think would go a long way if we're able to listen to, whoever's speaking on the other side, and then you respond and then you understand first and then respond rather than reacting to it, right?
The emphasis on soft skills in a personal regard, I also really think is very important. And I mean, it helps you stand out. It helps you, be professional. And it helps you get results. And I just feel like that's something that I really definitely agree on that. Like it's something that maybe, not everyone has, but they ever been learned to do it or have those skills. Here at the Americas Basin, here at USMC Nepal, we are doing a bit more when it comes to soft skills based sessions or engagements, having programs to help youth do that. So that's something that's on our minds as well. So it's interesting to say that's also something that you think is very important. And when it, of course, in soft skills, what's important is how to have a dialogue, how to have a constructive dialogue that's effective, gets what you want to get achieved, but it's done in a strategic way, right? Like strategic communication, I would say. So there's that in your own personal, professional capacity, and people can definitely benefit from that. But there's also something to be said when it comes to a company's capacity to be communicative and to their audience or to their main market base. So when it comes to public-private dialogue, I think we've seen that it is essential for improving the business environment, having those kind of conversations. So in your view, which policy discussions should Nepal prioritize to attract responsible foreign direct investment and also support entrepreneurship?
I feel like this is what I'm thinking about day in, day out, right? As a part of the work that I do. But again, I think I go back to looking at how what you just mentioned, multi-stakeholder engagement being so important, especially in terms of looking at sort of sustained transformation for communities, Nepal or otherwise too, right? And again, Nepal is at this really interesting time, I think. And one thing that I really appreciate right now, right, before even going to what I think, is the way in which this government is positioning Nepal in terms of the messaging. It's clear, right, that they're trying to create this environment to help facilitate investment. They want to bring in more enabling policies. They want to help ease of doing business. But again, as a company that has invested in Nepal for the last 50 plus years, right, the reality is sometimes messaging and then actually the policy paradigm could also differ, right?
Definitely.
So one of the things that we've experienced is somewhere in this dialogue, especially between industry associations different members of the government and also civil society. I think what's required is this candid, consistent dialogue, what you just said. And I feel like we have a tremendous opportunity right now. The message has been clear. The vision is clear for the prime minister, even, and the government. But what will come in the budget? Because in the end, that's the real sort of first policy test, right?
Yeah.
And besides that, I think once the policy comes through, then how is it implemented? How is it accepted? And how is it trickled down, right? Through the ranks. I think for us, one major thing I've realized is, and it's shifting, I think, and I myself have to learn to be patient again. 6 weeks of this new government, and we're expecting rapid transformation. Mm-hmm. The reality is in 6 weeks, so many things have improved. Like when I go to a department, and interact with somebody, I get proactive responses, like completely. Everybody's really genuinely wanting to help. So I think having that sort of clarity of certain policy reforms and tweaks, which will give us just that predictability that, hey, please come in and invest. Your investments are secure in Nepal. And, and you can continue to also make profits in Nepal. And you can, maybe even repatriate some of that as well. Mm. So I think somewhere where we need to look at is, one is how can we bring in investments, right? How can we ensure the old investments stay as well? But I think we're also at this space where there's so many amazing ideas from Nepali entrepreneurs as well, especially if you look at the tech space or any other spaces. Why can't we look at facilitating those to go outside as well? Because the market right now is beyond Nepal and global, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this shift in policy of not just looking at what can we bring into Nepal, but what we can take from Nepal and scale out of Nepal to benefit the country itself, I think that's a space where we could probably work on, and especially look forward to facilitating through the American Chamber as well.
And it's interesting because we are at a very pivotal time in Nepal's history. A lot of things are new, they're changing, and hopefully for the better. But with that being said, I think the work that you do is also it's really interesting in general, of course, but at the specific time, it's very important, right? Because you work at the intersection of business sustainability, but also public policy. Mm-hmm. When public policy is now being made and also executed in a rapid fashion, right? So, in your opinion, how do multinational companies such as Coca-Cola come into play with all of this, right? Talk about that direct investment. So, but how do Coca-Cola or other companies like it contribute to Nepal's long-term economic growth beyond direct investment and employment?
I think this is a very important question, right? So, not just FDIs, but like you said, any investment, any private sector, any entrepreneur looking to invest in something in Nepal. I think the main thing is ultimately the businesses are residing in communities, right? Yeah. These are hand in hand and these are interdependent. I just want to share in terms of like Coca-Cola at least, and then I can kind of zoom out a bit from there as well. So if you look at sort of the direct engagement from Coca-Cola, right? Last 50 years, directly we have 600 direct employees, 1,000 indirect employees. But if you look at that larger value chain, we're connected with more than 5,000 individuals. If you look at the transport logistics, if you look at all the ancillary industries that are developed downstream and upstream in our entire value chain as well, right? I think as the more the companies localize, right, we end up connecting pretty much with the entire socioeconomic fabric. So beyond this, throughout Nepal, we have more than 240 distributors that we're connected with. And then if you want to take that number wider, we're actually connected with 200,000 retail outlets, right? So if you look at what we call kirana puzzles and khadagars, they're like groceries and small eateries, right? And what I learned over time is that in each of these outlets where there's a presence of any FMCG product really, but particularly maybe even some of our brands, often retailers, 30 to 40% of their revenue comes from selling FMCG products, right? Which means it's quite an important part of the local economic pillar as well. And in this, I think, especially for us, like we're also trying to support businesses as partners. So we're giving coolers. Yeah. In the coolers, yes. Yeah. In the coolers, you can put in our products. But if you go further into sort of the remote areas, people can also put in some of their produce, right? Milk, dairy items, and that improves shelf life as well. So what I'm trying to say is there's certain things you see directly when there's an injection of investment of a business. You'll see plant, right? You'll see like some things happening around it. But the real impact is that sort of hub and spoke model of how it all trickles outward and really embeds into the entire community. And going back, I mean, see, again, given that sort of commitment of being more sustainable and responsible as well, we're also looking at how we can reduce our carbon footprint overall, right? So hence the priority has been to really localize. So I mentioned, for example, the transport logistics being a whole other service industry that's developed. But if you look at it, a lot of the products we need, ingredients we need, or packaging materials we need as well, right now more than 90% we procure locally, which is a big deal. That also means new industries are coming up. So I remember 5 years ago, we used to import 100% of sugar from outside. But now there are mills in Nepal which are producing very high quality refined sugar, which also abide by the global supplier guidance principle. So I think that's the other lens that's also important is whenever we partner, we bring in the global standard of ensuring human rights, dignity of labor, all of that is also respected. So I think that's one way in which we're adding a lot of value. But the other side, right? I've been talking about the business side a lot. The other side, which is my other hat, I guess, which is the sustainability and more philanthropic side is the good thing is, again, when you're connected to large companies like ours, then there's an entire philanthropic arm, which is the Coca-Cola Foundation as well, which brings in large strategic projects in areas that are important to the country and the governments that we work with, right? And so for us here as well, what I really appreciate is that the Coca-Cola Foundation in Nepal, we've done these strategic public-private partnerships for the last 15 years. And even now in the last 3 years, like we have a commitment of over $4 million to the country. And some of the more exciting projects are actually regional, which means you can take cross-country learnings. We have, for example, a project with UNDP that we're doing, which is around waste management, and it's split across 8 countries in the region, right? But what does that mean for Nepal? It means in Namche, in Lumbini, and even in Kathmandu Valley and other larger sort of first and second tier cities, we're creating material recovery facilities in line with government of Nepal's vision for waste management, right? So creating that infrastructure and sort of capacity building work. So it always excites me to see how we can, again, partner with the government, with the stakeholders to see how we can contribute either as a company, but also through the philanthropic arm in this way to give back to Nepal.
It's really interesting because I think I've been here for a minute and I've been able to learn about all the great work that Coca-Cola here in Nepal is doing, especially through their foundation. And it's interesting because I think from my perspective, before learning about this, I think I knew that companies and businesses, they did projects such a way, things that was outside of their business model that was helpful for communities. But I think the extent of it sometimes kind of gets lost. People don't see it. Maybe they'll see, the brand, they'll see the name, but they're not really connecting it, right? It is really, really great for me in a personal capacity to see all the great work that so many companies are doing when it comes to not just monetarily, but just giving back to the community in other ways, like you've give a few examples just now. So switching gears just a little bit, I guess in that same vein, there are a lot of companies who do these things. And I think here, so I've been at the U.S. Embassy, I've been also more aware about the American companies who are doing that kind of work as well outside of their business operations. And of course, as General Secretary of AmCham, which if you don't know what AmCham, again, is right behind her, this very nice big flexible right there, is the American Chamber of Commerce here in Nepal, which is an organization made up of American companies working together. But in your role at AmCham, how do you see American companies here in Nepal contributing to workforce development? I mean, outside of Coca-Cola, you already described it, but when it comes to development, innovation, professional mentorship, and opportunities, because again, there's that civic responsibility part, cultural responsibility part, but there's also kind of reaching into the professional network in that way, right? So, in that capacity, what are your thoughts on that?
So firstly, for people in the room who don't know as much about the American Chamber, right? I did want to share that Nepal is one of the youngest U.S. Chamber accredited entities as well. And we're so proud of the work that the Secretariat and the team have done to ensure that we also receive this accreditation in less than a year and a half of our existence as well. I think that that timeline itself, and I think the timeline itself also shows the belief in the partnership, right, between the U.S. and Nepal, that there is an opportunity to look at mutual prosperity also between these two countries. And what's exciting for me is in the last 3.5 years, I've seen AmCham really grow as well.
Yeah, definitely.
More than 65 members at this point. And I believe directly, again, we employ more than 30,000,
which is a lot,
or 40,000 maybe even now, employees, and then indirectly connected to over 100,000 people. And I feel like because of this, right, there's a lot of opportunities, which gives us a cross-culture exchange, but also a learning opportunity between sort of the American headquarters, maybe of certain companies, and then also the local organizations, right? And for us, right, it's not just working for the companies. If you look at the relationship between the US and Nepal, a lot of people are going for university as well, right?
Including you as well?
Including me as well, yes. And, I think anywhere you go in the world, whether it's the US or, for further studies, I think what's really important is that exchange and exposure, right? So what are some things that we learn and bring back, whether we come back and work with a company or whether we start our own businesses? And I think one thing that I've always really admired is sort of there's a very strong, what I call the American work ethic, which is like hard work, will get you places, right? That sort of thinking, I think that is quite good for even people in Nepal, right? To have that kind of work ethic, to bring that back. And then also respecting all kinds of work as well, right? In the end, that every work has its value and we should respect. So as long as somebody's working, independent, and sort of earning for themselves and doing something for their families, I think there's something to admire about that as well, right? So everyone's being productive. But for us, I mean, what I see is there's a lot of inspirational stories as well. I mean, you talked about me coming back. Fortunately, unfortunately, I'm an employee. I'm not an entrepreneur. And I look at other people. I mean, that's okay, right? I mean, that's just my path. But I really have a lot more admiration for people who come back and start something on their own. I mean, I keep thinking of even things like, the Dole owner who came back now. He's like expanded his entire venture, right? Then I think of people who are investing in like tech as well, or, doing all sorts of things. So personally, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a comfort zone being an employee of an organization. But at the same time, I think it's the entrepreneurs who really bring back that spirit and idealism to really make a difference and impact. And they're trying to do new things in Nepal, which is something that I think is quite admirable as well.
And I don't want you to sell yourself short, though. I feel like, of course, entrepreneurship is great. And of course, here at the embassy, we have a lot of entrepreneurship-based programs. But there's going to be some people who get the knowledge and, in university, when in the U.S., but again, like you come back and you contribute away, like you said, whether it's the work ethic or other qualities, that's still very important. And obviously, you've done very well for yourself with it. So I just want to give you props for that. It's very important. You're a hardworking lady. Not only is she a company, again, at AmCham, she wears many hats. With that being said, when it comes to think about this kind of cross-cultural business exchange and a cultural business exchange, those kind of things, I know when we think about the U.S. companies, we think about certain values attached to them, right? And the values thinking about transparency, emphasizing that in your corporate culture, long-term planning, like you stated at the top, right? And also community investment, like we've always also talked about in our conversation. So when it comes to, we talk about the personal aspect people could take back from the U.S. and come here in Nepal and make great things happen. But when it comes to the businesses themselves and their business practices specifically, do you think that there are some practices that would resonate really strongly here within Nepal's own business environment? Or maybe not. Maybe you think actually a little different. Because I know that kind of cultural competency is very important, but there is something to be said about that kind of exchange, right?
So I think you've kind of answered the question just before asking it as well. Um, I think the fact that you talk about sort of transparency and accountability, right? Um, I think even in our cultural context, we have that. It just depends on how things get interpreted, right? And sort of in Nepal, also, I feel like culturally we do things a certain way, right? There's a way of showing people respect. There's a way of sort of engaging as well, which could be different from other markets, not just the US, right? But it could be different. But I think in the end, something that I think, especially again, as I say now with this government, which will resonate, is the same fact. It's transparency and accountability. Definitely. It's looking at long-term thinking to see at how businesses can go sustainably, right? And it's also really investing in people and communities in the end. But another thing I think which we can work on here in Nepal is how can you create like win-win policies as well, where I mean, as private sector, I think we should accept that regulations are a good thing as well. I think,
accountability and that.
Accountability and also sort of for the larger public good, right? There has to be a check and balance, so to speak. I know there's considerations like I just taking even learnings from a country like India, like at some point they deregulated, right? But that was because there was a trust that private sector would try and do the right thing, and governments accordingly started to deregulate a bit to make it a bit easier. I think we're at that similar point in Nepal as well right now, where if we can get to a point where the policy framework is a little bit simplified, if there's a little bit deregulation, but at the same time, right, I think you hear it from the finance minister, sorry to quote him, but he keeps saying, as long as you're a compliant corporate citizen, this government will continue to open doors for you. That's kind of the messaging he's given, right? So I think that's a good message, especially because the last few years, we've had so many challenges. Yeah. And I think the major thing that we really need to look at is how can we create a win-win ecosystem? And I know you refer to it as public-private partnerships, but I call this sort of the golden triangle of empowerment.
Golden triangle.
So if you imagine the triangle, right? Private sector, civil society, and government, and how do we connect the three dots? And this is kind of how I've worked, whether I've worked with Coca-Cola or in the development sector. It's how do we leverage that golden triangle by bringing all three in the middle? And that's actually the space where probably good public policy is also made.
I like that, though. I'm a little bit better than public-private partners. It's kind of that's cute. It's cute, like it. But also, it's a good visualization for that, how that works and how you are a part of that. So thank you for that, because I think here at the embassy, we have been doing a lot of commercial diplomacy initiatives because we really do want to strengthen the U.S. Nepal commercial cooperation, right? So this information for me here at the embassy is obviously very important. Trying to figure out how we can work with our partners here in Nepal on issues of mutual interest and, of course, mutual benefit. So it's really good to hear the kind of the work is being done, slowly but surely things are happening, and also getting insights from people who are leader positions to make those things happen. So with that being said, I think it's wanting to ask from your perspective as well. Of course, we're having this coffee chat. We're having a chat and we're having getting the answer about your perspective on a variety of things. But the work does not end here. It does not end here. We have many things we still can do to have greater collaboration. But from your perspective, if you could think of one major opportunity for stronger U.S. Nepal commercial cooperation, and you think that maybe deserves greater public attention, what would it be and why?
Okay, so this one, some of you would have heard it before, so I apologize. I would say, honestly, the one thing that is really critical and where the US and Nepal sort of extended teams, right, whether it's government, businesses, chambers could collaborate, is to really look at the framework of moving away from aid and really ensuring that trade is what we emphasize for the next sort of couple of years, how we can really make sure that private sector is able to take up that vacuum that has been created now that overall globally aid is declining. So, for us, for the longest time, and I used to work in the development sector, so I can say this, we were in a very grants-based kind of model, which of course also resulted in good work, but it's a little bit again of the mindset Are we wanting to be dependent on grants, or do we want to look at investments to really sort of revitalize the next chapter of our growth as well? So I think I would keep it simple. Trade, not aid, if possible, right?
Here's the one.
And I think, again, echoing what I said earlier, is to look at sort of the power of partnerships. I think we can't work in silos. I understand that very much in my role with Coca-Cola. I think we believe in the power of partnerships. All of the kind of projects that I talked about earlier, it's not like, me or my team are going out there and doing that. We're actually working with people who are experts in their field, right? So if it's water, WWF, Water Aid, or even the local NGOs, right? So I think we really need to, again, learn how to leverage partnerships as well and see how we can partner for progress. And the last is also, I think, looking at continuing to invest in human capital again. Like I said earlier, I think that exposure and exchange both ways, I think is really important. And I would still lastly also say that I think while we're all looking at what we can bring into Nepal, it's also taking Nepal globally. And I think that mindset shift will also really help. Yeah.
So when you think about this, are there any, I guess, sectors that you feel like have the greatest opportunity for these things to actually happen, have that greater collaboration?
So I think, as a small land-linked country, as Sujib calls it, right? I've tried not to think of us as landlocked anymore, right? I think these are things that are very clear, to be honest. I mean, the government has identified some of them. Even from the American Chamber, we look at sort of these 5 key priority areas for us as well. Again, even though I'm not a tech person, I would put digital and tech first and foremost on that. I mean, I feel like technology has this ability, right, if we play it right, to really help us level the playing field actually across the world as well, so that we can compete at that global scale. So I think the technology sector, of course, is a no-brainer, I think. Even there, and if I'm not mistaken, I saw that there's a data center that is coming into Nepal as well. So we could be part of that larger global infrastructure ecosystem, right? But how is that powered? Is that powered with green energy? So I think sort of looking at if Nepal can be a hub for green energy, initially for the region, but maybe globally as well, right? So looking at hydro and solar and harnessing the power of renewable energy, I think, is a second sector. Tourism, of course, I can't forget that.
Tourism, very important.
Yes, from the Himalayas to the hills to the plains, and then all the UNESCO heritage sites around us. I think Nepal has, again, a unique opportunity to really disrupt hospitality. I think we can lead by example in sustainable luxury tourism, not just in sort of looking at your regular tourism. And there's so many, even American-led brands and companies, I think, really investing in that here. Again, I have to do justice to my own industry as well. Or I think manufacturing as well is, so manufacturing, I think, plays a very interesting role, even if you go beyond FMCG for like cement and any kind of manufacturing, right? Oftentimes when we're looking at job creation or looking at employment opportunities, you're looking at somebody who has a degree, who's gone through sort of the whole system, maybe he's done their undergrad, master's, etc. But the reality for us in Nepal, at least, is there's also a population that may have had to leave school after 8th grade, may have had to, due to different situations as well. And I feel like manufacturing, I'm not just saying FMCG, across the board, is a sector that can absorb, different skill sets as well, not just looking at sort of an educational certificate as the highest requirement, but really being more inclusive in that sense and being able to accommodate, a larger population as well. And lastly, I guess, services overall, because I think that's maybe the second sort of highest contributor to our GDP as well. So, I mean, these are the sectors really broadly, 5. And I've tried to do AmSham justice because these are our priority sectors as well. So hopefully the American Chamber will appreciate that, these are actually where I see the opportunities for Nepal as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to be mindful of the time, but I also want to just, in our formal chat, on a personal note, if you don't mind. So when thinking about who you are, Sneh, of course, we see young people, women who are increasingly shaping Nepal's business and policy landscape, right? And of course, you have a very interesting leadership journey. But based on that journey, what recommendations would you offer to people like you pursuing leadership roles in the private sector?
Mm.
Or honestly, anyone? General advice, specific advice, we'll take all of it.
So that's a really interesting question. I think when we're chatting about this a little bit offline as well, right? Sometimes you realize, especially in the manufacturing world, and in certain rooms, there are fewer women than we'd like to see. But I mean, I see that changing already in the last 3 years. But one advice, right? Don't do what I just did in the previous question. Don't dim your own light.
Oh,
I just have to remind myself. I think it comes naturally to us a little bit sometimes to sort of downplay some of the things that we've done as women, right? So I would say let's try not to dim our light. The other thing is also, see, for me, that also happens because, like I said, I came in from the development sector. So when I first came into sort of corporate Coca-Cola, I always sort of gave the other person benefit of doubt. I'd be like, I'm not from this sector. Maybe they understand better than me. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. But I would not afford that same kindness towards myself.
oh, yeah.
So that's I think a reminder, and hopefully to anybody, right, at any level in whatever you're pursuing, I would say just if you're being kind to the other person, do remember to sort of be kind to yourself as well. And I think the other thing is, I think socially also we're socialized to be a lot more accommodating as women. And sometimes I think we're looking at how we can have perfect outcomes. But really after, working for now, formally at least 15 plus years and informally maybe longer, I think it's always progress over perfection. I mean, if you get through the day and get to like the next thing, that's okay. And you shouldn't let that sort of hang over your head, and really count your blessings of moving forward each step every day.
I love that. Progress over perfection. That's something I'm also going to take for all. So I think I need that right now. Progress over perfection. So thank you. That was a good closer. I think that was really great. It was a good way to end our formal conversation. So with that, I would say thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us today. And of course, thank you all in the audience for coming here at the American Center at U.S. Embassy Nepal. It's been a delight to be able to share my time with Sneh and also you all. And hopefully we will see you again for our future commercial diplomacy events. And of course, as always, in partnership with AmCham Nepal. So with that, I think we're going to close out and give them time for you to have more chat if you wish to do so after this. Thank you so much.